Bentornati! Welcome back to Dwarf Fortress for Beginners, the series in which I teach you how to play Dwarf Fortress using almost exclusively in-game tutorials and guides. Just in case you're wondering why the map has changed compared to the previous episodes, I started another fortress because the previous one was getting close to autumn and the arrival of the first caravan, and I didn't want for that to happen randomly in the middle of a tutorial. So I quickly progressed this one to a point that is pretty much equivalent to where we left in the previous episode, except it's just late spring here. In this episode, we'll take a look at the other food sources guide. Fishing. If there is a river or pond nearby, you may consider fishing. If the water isn't frozen, a worker with the fishing labor assigned will begin fishing automatically. You can optionally choose to designate a fishing zone if you don't want your workers going far afield. Remember, your workers do not eat raw fish. You may build a fishery to prepare them. Do this by selecting workshops, farming, fishery. Alright, let's minimize this for a second and let's unpack all this information. You should already have a dwarf assigned to fishing in your fort. So let's look for them in here in the labor. And at this point we want to select the fisher dwarves. And you should look for somebody that has already this fish icon. This is your default fisher. Now, if you cannot find anybody with this icon enabled, it might mean that your default fisher maybe died or went missing. If that happens, don't despair, you can always look for somebody else that maybe doesn't have a lot to do, and you click on the icon and now you have another fisher. Just keep in mind that an active fisher will probably just fish every second of his life and will probably not do any other job because of that. So try to assign the job to somebody that isn't already taking care of some critical need of your fortress, like your main farmer or miner or bookkeeper, manager, broker, pretty much anything else. On the other hand, should you want your fisher or fishers to stop fishing for a while, you can choose the nobody does this option up in here. Doing this practically pauses all fishing works in the entire fortress. Now, for the purpose of this guide though, I will re-enable fishing by clicking on only selected do this. By the way, this should be your default configuration. The guide also suggested to create a fishing zone so that we can restrict the dwarves to fish in a predetermined area. To do this, we go to the surface and then we can open the zones menu in here. And then we can simply create this zone like any other zones, but we need to click on the fishing icon in here. And we also want to have this zone cover a little bit of this brook we have in here. And then we click on accept. The only real requirement for a fishing zone is that it has to cover at least some squares of natural water. So a brook, like in this case, it's okay. A pond, let me see, do we have ponds in here? So yeah, one of these could be okay. So we could have a fishing zone like this, but basically you only need one. The real purpose of doing this, it's so that your fisher dwarf doesn't go elsewhere and it only goes to fish in a controllable spot, somewhere that you know, somewhere where you can also possibly defend. Other than this, it can be brook, river, pond, ocean, or possibly also underground lakes. Okay, let's go find our fisher. Let's open the citizens tab. Let's see, we should be able to recognize them because they are called the fisher dwarf. Of course, we can click on the magnifying glass icon, and then from here there's the camera icon. So now we are in follow mode. I can also close this as long as I don't move the camera myself with either the arrow keys or WASD. I can unpause and we should, yes, it goes immediately to fish. In here you see that current occupation is fish. I can click on them again, and yes, they are fishing and they are in the designated zone. Yes, they are. Alright, let's leave them be for a second. Now, what else was the guide saying? Yes, our dwarves don't eat raw fish, so we need to prepare the raw fish in some way. That is the job of the fishery workshop. Okay, so I think we will need to mine a little bit of space in here to house maybe 1 or 2 new workshops. Let's do that real quick. So 3, 4, 5, 6 tiles this way. Let's unpause and wait a second for the miners to complete this. Alright, now that we have some free space, let's go to building, workshops, farming, and fishery. Place the fishery here, select any material, and let them build. With the fishery done, we should start seeing dwarves come up and clean raw fish into usable, prepared fish. Now this kind of job is assigned automatically, so if there is any unprepared fish in your fortress, you will see there it is, it just appeared. Prepare a raw fish. And there they are. They came up immediately and they are cleaning some mussels. This is also pretty typical, like there is mussels pretty much everywhere in Dwarf Fortress. Now depending on the kind of aquatic creature that you are preparing in here, this job might result in various items. So there's gonna be some usable flesh, but also, like in this case, let me pause for a second, in the case of mussels, you will have some mussel shells. Shells can be used to make crafts, even to make some kind of very light armor. It's now at this point a little bit of a meme out of the Kid Fox's streams that you can make mussel shell leggings. However, let me point out that shells are considered trash by the game, and their value is kind of trash. Unfortunately, as awesome as they sound, they will never get a lot out of your trades. Also, if you have a refuse stockpile, like I do have in here, they will be brought in the refuse stockpile. Alright, let's continue reading the guide. Gathering. It is possible to survive by gathering plants outside. Do this by selecting the gathering order, then draw a rectangle over the bushes you wish to search. Okay, let's minimize for a second. I believe I've shown this already in the survival guide where we made drinks by brewing plants, but for the sake of completeness, let's do this right now. Let's select the plant gathering order from here. It is highlighted currently, and then we can draw a rectangle over some of these really colorful plants. Let's look in here. Now I will draw a rectangle over these. Now some of this will now have a plant gathering icon. Let me zoom in a little bit. Not all of them. The reason is not all plants would be in a state where we can gather something. So this is usually also understandable if you mouse over them. Now this, for example, is just a tree sapling, so there's nothing to harvest there. But some of these plants might be, let's say, not ripe, not ready to harvest. Now let's unpause, let the dwarves stream in and collect all these beautiful, delicious veggies. Who doesn't love veggies? As you can see in here, I don't think I noticed before, but this bitter melon vines, they did not disappear. So we'll probably have more melons show up in here. So all these colorful plants will now be stored in our food stockpiles along with the prepared fish. It sounds like the start of a delicious meal already, but for now let's open the guide again and click on next and see what else we can do. Butchering. Meat from livestock you slaughter is a source of food. To slaughter an animal, you must first build a butcher's shop. Do this by selecting the building in Workshops, Farming, Butcher. Okay, let's do this right now. Building, Workshops, Farming. Here's the butcher. Let's put it right in here. Select a material for it and unpause. There it is. Butchering, just like preparing raw fish, is an automatic job. So all we need to do at this point is designate an animal for slaughtering. But let's continue on the guide. Once the shop is built, open the Creatures Info menu. From there, select the Pets Livestock tab. There you can select which animals to slaughter. You may need to minimize the tutorial to see the slaughter buttons. Note that some livestock must eat vegetation to survive. To keep them alive, use the Pen Pasture zone from the zones menu to select a section of grass and click the Add button to assign the animals. Now, I think also this was showcased in a previous episode, but let's quickly go on the surface and let's look for our already existing pen pasture area. If you're curious, this can be made pretty much anywhere. Just need to click on the horse icon here. If you have a zone on grass or even on mushrooms, if you are deep down underground in the deep caves, the animals in there will be able to graze. Otherwise, animals like horses, yaks, cows, donkeys, and so on, they will starve. When you have the zone, you simply click on it, and then you can click this button here to select which animals to assign to it. In order to assign an animal, you simply click on the icon. For example, right now I assign this stray dog that doesn't really need to graze, but just to confirm that yes, now a dwarf brought the little dog in here, we can unclick this so it's not assigned anymore. This green icon here instead just signifies that these animals are assigned to a pasture, not necessarily even this one. Should they instead be either in a cage or tied to a restraint, the icon would change accordingly. So a rope for restraint or a cage icon for a cage. Alright, it's now time to demonstrate the unfortunate final destination of our livestock. So let's open, as indicated in here, the creatures menu. Then we go to pets and livestock. And these icons that are now highlighted here are the ones that we would have to use to designate an animal to be slaughtered. Now, your starting animals will be slightly different than mine. You should have some dogs and some cats. That should be a default. But when it comes to other animals, you may have other kinds. You may have maybe donkeys or horses or stuff like that. I'm noticing right now that I have 3 male yak bulls, so I think I'm gonna slaughter one of them because I can't even start a breeding pair unless I find a female. So let's click on the icon, and now you can see that this changes to ready for slaughter. Now let's go downstairs, let's check on the butcher's shop, and in theory as soon as I unpause, yes, automatically slaughter stray yak bull is active, and we should see somebody bring the unsuspected poor animal. Oh my gosh, that was super quick. It's almost like the animal exploded in all its constituent parts. So what we get out of an animal slaughter, depending of course on the animal and how large it is and the kind of animal, you get a lot of things. In this case we get the hooves, we get 2 prepared eyes, we get some cartilage, lungs, heart, liver, tripe, and so on and so forth. So a lot of organs, of course. Some of them are edible. We got a skull. A skull can be used to create a totem. But most important of all, we get meat, we get fat, and we get a skin. Now, while the meat can be directly used in the kitchen for the preparation of meals, the fat and the skin need to undergo another step of preparation. The fat needs to be rendered into tallow, which by the way happens automatically in the kitchen. The skin instead can be tanned at a tannery shop to make it into usable leather. So even though the guide doesn't mention this, let's create a tanner so that this skin doesn't just rot away in storage. So let's go to building, workshop, farming, tanner, and we can place one in here. I'm gonna select same material just for consistency. Now let's wait a second for somebody to go and grab the necessary boulder. There it is, the tannery is ready, and immediately the tan-a-hide job was created in here, and the dwarf already took the stray yak bull skin and they are processing it. So let's wait for it to finish. There it is, and that yak skin resulted into 2 pieces of yak leather that is ready for the creation of either crafts or clothes or some leather armor, for example. Alright, so this was, I think, the last page, yes, of the other food sources guide. There's a couple more things that I would like to mention. First of all, that fat that was just rendered into tallow, I think it just happened in here and was already stored. Here it is, it just barely, you can barely see it in here. 9 stacks of yak tallow. Let's find it very quickly in the labor and then kitchen tab. So labor, kitchen, it's together with meat, fish and other. There it is, yak tallow. Click on this icon to disallow the use in cooked meals. You'll thank me in the future when you'll eventually want to test your Dwarf Fortress proficiency by making soap. And last but not least, let's visit the kitchen and celebrate all this abundance of types of food by creating some meals. We get the option here of creating either easy, fine or lavish meals. The difference is easy meals use 2 different ingredients, fine use 3 and lavish use 4. Now, you don't actually lose those ingredients because usually a lavish meal results in a larger stack of food. However, if your cook is not very skilled, by preparing a lavish meal, you're actually getting 50% of the experience from the same ingredients because it's 4 ingredients in one meal. So they get only, let's say, 1 skill increase, whereas with an easy meal, they can use 2 ingredients to get that same skill increase. So it's probably a good idea early on to just create easy meals until your cook gets really good, and then you can go ahead and do either fine or lavish meals depending on, of course, the availability of separate different ingredients in your fortress. I will go middle of the road right now and I will order a few fine meals because right now we have a lot of different types of food. We have fish, we have all those types of plants, and we also have all the little bits of the yak there. So let's unpause and wait for somebody to swing by and collect ingredients. There you go, we're gonna have mussels apparently, and a potato plant. These are not potatoes, but the plant itself, and some taro. That sounds delicious. And a little while later, there you go. What is that? 4 stacks of taro stew. So a fine meal is always called a stew of something. 1 random ingredient is chosen to represent the entire thing. A fine meal is always biscuits, and a lavish meal is only a roast, if I remember correctly. If you want to know what's inside though, wondering if you would like it, you can click on the magnifying glass in here and it says this is a taro stew. The ingredients are minced mussel, minced potato plant and minced taro. So, pretty cool. Alright, we just went from eating raw mushrooms to fine taro mussel stew. Amazing. Now, before you go full hog with meals though, please remember that if you don't explicitly disallow it in the kitchen tab, your dwarves may decide to use your drinks as ingredients. So if you haven't already done that, let's go to labor kitchen. Let me show you. And where it says drinks, this icon here governs the availability of this kind of item as an ingredient in meals. Okay, so unless you have a absolute, ton of drinks and you want to also use them as a separate ingredient, go ahead and leave it in the green. Otherwise, I prefer to uncheck this so that my drinks remain as alcohol and give that nice inebriation morale boost to my dwarves, as opposed to get like diluted together with mussels and taros and stuff in a roaster or something. Very well. So this is it for this episode of Dwarf Fortress for Beginners. If you enjoyed this tour of Dwarven cuisine, feel free to leave a like, or better still, say hi in the comments. I read all the comments and I try to answer to all the comments. Unless you're very, very rude, in that case I just hide you. But I hope that's not the case. Or also, why not share this video with some people you think might like it. You do you. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again in the next episode. Alla prossima!